A 4-year-old boy is stolen from his bed and slaughtered inside a locked English manor. In 1860, the horrific murder of Francis Kent at Roadhouse stunned the nation. Detectives knew immediately that this was an inside job. The windows were bolted, the doors were barred, and the killer was sitting right there at the family breakfast table. But as suspicion fell heavily on the boy's 16-year-old half-sister, the local police managed to lock themselves inside the mansion's kitchen. This single, baffling blunder gave the villain hours of unmonitored freedom to burn the most critical piece of evidence. Today, we unzip the lost case file of a botched investigation where the law was forced to let a prime suspect walk free, protecting the accused to punish the system's own incompetence. To understand how a killer escaped justice, you have to look at the walls of Roadhill House. In Victorian England, a man's home wasn't just his castle, it was a moral fortress. The Kent family belonged to the wealthy middle class, a social circle obsessed with Christian piety, strict manners, and absolute privacy. To the outside world, they were the pinnacle of British respectability. But behind closed doors, the estate was a pressure cooker of resentment. Mr. Kent had married the family's former governess after his first wife passed away, creating a toxic divide between the children of the first marriage and those of the second. 16-year-old Constance Kent, a fiercely independent and deeply unhappy teenager from the first marriage, watched as her young half-brother, Francis, received the affection and luxury she felt she had been denied. The house was elegant, grand, and suffocating. And on the night of June 29, 1860, that suffocating tension finally snapped. It was the perfect crime scene because nothing was out of place. On the morning of June 30th, the family nursemaid, Elizabeth Gough, woke up to a terrifying reality. 4-year-old Francis was gone from his crib. The blanket was neatly folded back, as if he had been gently lifted out by someone he knew and trusted. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, and no forced entry. A frantic search of the estate began, winding through the grand hallways and out into the manicured gardens. It ended in the absolute worst place possible, the outdoor privy. Hidden deep inside the vault of the exterior lavatory lay the body of the young boy. His throat had been cleanly cut. The brutality of the act stood in stark contrast to the pristine safety of the estate. The house was entirely sealed from the inside, meaning whoever committed this atrocity was currently standing in the yard, pretending to mourn. The local Wiltshire constabulary arrived at a scene that required the sharpest forensic minds of the era. Instead, they brought staggering incompetence. The officers quickly deduced that the killer had to be a resident of the house, but they were utterly unequipped to interrogate the wealthy gentry. In 1860, English law enforcement was deeply hesitant to aggressively cross-examine affluent citizens, fearing a backlash from the upper class. As a result, their movements through the mansion were chaotic and completely undisciplined. While conducting an active sweep of the property for bloodstained clothing or weapons, 2 of the responding officers somehow managed to get themselves locked inside the mansion's massive kitchen. For several critical hours, the investigators were completely neutralized, trapped behind a heavy wooden door. Outside that door, the crime scene was left entirely unmonitored, leaving the killer with a massive, unexpected window of total freedom to destroy the evidence. When the police finally freed themselves from the kitchen, the damage to the case was already done. Suspicion had rapidly zeroed in on 16-year-old Constance Kent. She was known to be a difficult, rebellious child who deeply resented her stepmother's family. Soon, a vital breakthrough emerged from the estate's laundry list. One of Constance's 3 heavy night dresses had mysteriously vanished from the wash. A thorough search of the basement boiler room revealed a horrifying sight: the charred, half-burned remnants of a blood-stained night dress stuffed into the furnace. It was the smoking gun the police needed. The problem was the timeline. Because the investigators had abandoned the crime scene during their kitchen confinement, they had completely destroyed the chain of custody. The defense could now argue that anyone in that house, or even an intruder, could have planted the gown in the boiler while the police were trapped. The physical proof was permanently compromised. Constance Kent was arrested and dragged before the local magistrates, facing a charge of capital murder. The courtroom was packed with a public desperate for a conviction, but the prosecution's case disintegrated almost immediately. In a preliminary hearing, the state's evidence met the harsh reality of due process. Because the local police had failed to secure the mansion and had compromised the crime scene, the presence of the half-burned nightdress wasn't enough to secure an indictment. The defense successfully argued that without a solid, uncompromised chain of custody, the prosecution was relying on pure speculation. Furthermore, the Victorian magistrates leaned heavily on societal bias, explicitly ruling that it seemed completely impossible for a young, refined teenage girl to have carried the heavy lad single-handed to the outdoor privy. With the evidence tainted and the court unwilling to breach the rules of legal proof, the case was dismissed. Constance Kent walked out of the courtroom a free woman. To the public, the dismissal was an outrage. A toddler was dead, an inside suspect was obvious, and the police remained entirely baffled. But the courtroom's refusal to indict Constance Kent exposes the deepest, most uncomfortable truth about the justice system. The law is not designed to hunt down criminals at all costs. It is designed to hold the state to a strict standard of behavior. This is the principle of the invisible shield. When the Wiltshire constables locked themselves in that kitchen, they didn't just look foolish. They violated the foundational rules of forensic integrity. If a court allows a jury to convict someone based on evidence found after a crime scene was left completely unmonitored, it gives the government the power to convict anyone using sloppy, unchecked, or potentially planted evidence. The court chose to let a highly likely suspect walk free rather than validate a broken, incompetent investigation. The law protected the suspect, not out of mercy, but to force the state to play by its own rules. The story of Road Hill House didn't end with the dismissal of charges. The absolute failure of the local police became a national scandal, forcing the British government to send a brilliant detective from London's Scotland Yard, Inspector Jonathan Wiltshire, to fix the mess. Wiltshire correctly deduced exactly what happened, but the damage done by the local constables in those early hours had left the legal case too weak to salvage at the time. 5 years later, ridden with guilt, Constance Kent would finally offer a full, voluntary confession, closing one of the most agonizing chapters in Victorian legal history. But the real legacy of this case lives on in every modern courtroom. The staggering incompetence of the Wiltshire police served as a harsh blueprint for how not to handle a crime scene. It directly accelerated the development of professional forensic science, the strict locking down of crime areas, and the absolute necessity of maintaining a pristine chain of custody. The tragedy at Road Hill House proved for all time that a justice system is only as good as its procedures. When the state fails to protect the integrity of the evidence, the law must step in as a shield, reminding us that shortcuts and blunders by the state will always pave the way for a killer's escape.